Well, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Mike Ellerhorst today, and on behalf of the Colorado Society of CPAs, and specifically the Technology Users Group. This is number two of our presentation of our four-part series in 2024. So we're very happy to have him here, and it's a real treat to have somebody with his expertise. Mike is a native of Colorado, and ironically, I'm sitting in a client's office right now that Mike knows from high school, right? So here we go, small world. So Mike is the founder of the NTM Advisory cybersecurity consulting firm. They specialize in helping clients navigate cybersecurity risks. He's got 15 years of experience in consulting, spent about 10 years with PwC, and he's worked with a range of companies from Fortune 10 enterprises to startups. And so without further ado, we're excited to have Mike share his experiences and his expertise from the last 15 years. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the time. It's, I live and breathe cybersecurity and risk, and so the opportunity to share and get input and share with the community is always something I enjoy doing. I hope you all get a chance to take something away from today, but I'm also excited to learn from you all as well. There's no one way to solve this problem, and every organization and every individual and professional kind of views these things a little bit differently. So, setting that context, I absolutely want engagement, want input, feedback, questions. As Tiffany mentioned, there are some kind of polling questions that are built into the presentation. So you'll have that opportunity if you don't want to unmute and, ask any questions. But if you do have things, please raise your hand, use the Zoom, capabilities or pop it in chat. And there will be opportunities throughout, as well as, I'll try and leave about 10 minutes at the end for us to just have an open Q&A. So with that, the topic for today is the Pragmatic CISO, and trying to drive towards business-aligned risk management. I use this title, Pragmatic CISO, and this is a practice that I try to bring in my consulting approach, in that CISOs or Chief Information Security Officers are often not looked at as pragmatic, or that is not necessarily the first adjective that is thought of by their business partners, by the industry. So it's a lens that I try to bring, and one that I encourage you to kind of open your mind to. How can you engage with information security leadership and practitioners in a pragmatic way? So kind of a quick agenda. One, I will start setting the stage a bit. I actually do see a huge overlap between information security and the CPA profession. And so I want to kind of set the stage and provide a little bit of the context for where I'm coming from today. And then we'll dive into, what does it mean to be or to engage with a pragmatic CISO? Oftentimes, security can be thought of as a really big, scary, kind of complex problem. And unfortunately, that results in inaction oftentimes. And so one of the things that I hope to leave you all with is, if you are finding yourself or your firm or your clients in a position where it's like, I think we need to do something about this cybersecurity thing, but I don't know what to do, I hope I can leave you with a few ways to potentially get started. There's no single one way that is the right way. There are a lot of ways that you can tackle this problem. All right, so kind of setting the stage here, to me, it all comes back to risk. And assurance is something that we as kind of professionals in the professional services space can provide to our clients for their customers, and to the marketplace around risk. We do operate in that setting of uncertainty, and we try to provide some structure and some metrics, some measurements to be able to measure and interact with or decide what to do with risk. A couple quotes here that anchored, some industry frameworks that anchor both of our roles, as accountants in risk, provide outward looking and provide valuable insights that help organizations manage risk, respond to uncertainty, and achieve their objectives. From a CISO perspective, and I use the title CISO, you can replace that with Director of Information Security, Security Manager, IT Leader, CIO. In essence, this CISO, the title that I use for CISO is the most senior person at a company that has responsibility around IT risk and information security risk. So the CISO is responsible for translating digital security risk to senior management, to identify what could go wrong, how bad it could be, understanding what the organization's risk appetite is, and then managing that risk, coming up with the best way to mitigate that risk. And to make it very practical, our friends at the SEC have made this very real, where we are needing to collaborate and partner much more. So for those of you who are not familiar, last year, right about this time, actually, they published a new rule on cybersecurity risk that had a couple different dimensions to it. One went into effect in December around the disclosure of material cybersecurity incidents. And then another went into effect starting for organizations, publicly traded organizations, filing their annual reports as of January 1. So very, very much. And now this is, the SEC is becoming another body with some enforcement capabilities around cybersecurity management, cybersecurity risk, cybersecurity reporting. So if you haven't, if any of your customers or clients have not talked about this or thought about this and are in the scope of SEC management, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to share a perspective and potentially help you or help your clients. I've already helped 3 enterprises develop either their materiality determination or the language that they've put into their 10Ks. All right. Oh, my nice slope didn't come through in this one. All right. So to me, starting off, pragmatic risk management is a balancing act. This is and balance. Balance is not static. Just like a ballerina that is on their tippy toe, they are constantly shifting and adjusting and managing how they are staying in that the appearance of balance. But it is a balancing act that always needs attention. So where do you start? What are ways to start with information security? To me, one of the most important things is starting with the business. So oftentimes as security practitioners, we start with the technology, and that leads to oftentimes over-engineered or more complex and more expensive solutions than may be appropriate for the organization or the market or the industry that they're functioning in. So if you haven't, if you're starting from square one, to me, start with the business. Understand what is the way that your company or your clients make money. Right? We're in professional services, so we are reliant upon clients for engaging with us, and in many ways, our people are our product, and our our service is the activities or the value that we provide to our organizations. How does the organization make money? What are certain things? What are things that could go wrong that would impact the organization's ability to make money? What are the products and services, and how is the value delivery of your company? Oftentimes, from an artifact perspective, I try and anchor this back to a corporate risk register. And if your firm or your clients don't have a corporate risk register, it's a great place to start this conversation. What are the potentially bad things that could occur? And then from a security perspective or an IT risk perspective, what are the technologies that support that business process, that activity, that product, that customer segment? From a CPA perspective, we deal with critical and confidential financial data. And if that data is exposed or lost outside of an organization, that could result in very bad business outcomes. One of the other artifacts that I recommend to develop, and it can be as formal as something like this, or even just an exercise of talking about your cyber goals or your information security or information risk goals in the context and directly tied to your business goals. Being able to do this, and this slide here was one that TJ was a colleague of mine at PwC who has gone on to be a CISO. He was the CISO at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, where he developed this placemat. And he started off every single one of his board and management presentations with this slide, setting the context of, as the security leader in the organization, I am here to support the business. I am not here to fight the business. I am not here to, achieve different objectives, but I am here to align with the business. Using this approach, I've found, is a really good way to get that buy-in and open up the conversation of, if these 5 business goals are not what the CFO agrees with, or the CMO, or whoever, this is a great opportunity to start that conversation. And then it's okay, maybe the cyber goal is not aligned to their goal, but that allows you to then engage and discuss how best can IT and cybersecurity risk be managed to support the business. All right, so starting with the business, start with our first poll question here. I'm curious, at your firm, at your organization, or at your clients' organizations, feel free to answer either way. Where does the CISO, or the head of security, typically report? All right, good responses. Thanks everybody for responding quickly. All right, good. So Tiffany or Jim, are the results popped up for everyone to see, or should I talk to them? Okay, great. So here it's a fully distributed. This is really interesting. This oftentimes, well, I've given this presentation or a variation of this a handful of times, and the CIO or the CTO is usually number one by far in where the reporting is. So it's interesting to see that that's actually the lowest. For those that responded other, I'm curious, either come off mute and share, or pop it in chat. What are some of the roles that they report up into in your organization? I've seen chief risk officer, sometimes COO, chief operating officer, may have some responsibility there. But this is good. And I suppose the one of the key takeaways also is it is not standard. It is, this is a conundrum for a lot of organizations around where does information security risk, where does the responsibility, where does the accountability, and where does the budget to deal with it ultimately sit. So if starting from square one, this is a good first question. Who ultimately is responsible and accountable for your information security risk? That's it's a really important question to ask and to understand. I'll pause also, see if anybody has any questions or any anecdotes or comments to share after this first place to start, starting with the business.
Well, Mike, I was just in a board meeting, and guess what? We had a cybersecurity report from the CIO, and this group deems the board of directors as being ultimately responsible for security of the company, right?
That's
I don't know
good.
what that is with your other clients, but that's what it is here.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Jim. One of the other stops on my journey that I didn't tee you up with, Jim, but my experience in industry. So I led part of the security team at Vail Resorts corporate here in Colorado.
Very nice.
I was responsible for the governance, risk, and compliance side, and so I actually ran the annual risk assessment. I developed the material that our CIO ultimately presented to the board, and so InfoSec was a standing topic in the quarterly board meetings, and the board had, they looked at themselves as a key governing body in the management of security risk, IT security risk. Good. Thanks for that, Jim. All right, we'll keep going on. So if you don't want to start with the business, or you don't feel like that's the best place to start for your company, for your clients, your organization, start with the people is another way to do it. So to me, security sometimes is relegated to IT, or sometimes is relegated to internal audit, or relegated to, one part of the business as, oh yeah, that's their responsibility. I actually want to flip it on its head and say security is everybody's responsibility. Just like in many ways, fiscal, solvency, fiscal responsibility, making good financial decisions should be spread out. It's not just in the CFO's seat. It should be done and thought about by all business leaders and by all employees. So to me, it's really important to build that coalition. And from a security practitioner perspective, oftentimes we don't do a good job of making that accessible and making it clear and enabling and empowering our colleagues across the organization to understand their role and to take action in their role. So if you're finding yourself in this position, you're like, well, I have no idea what my role is. A good place to start is to look at, ask about and read your company's information security policy. If you don't have an information security policy, ask the question, why don't we have an information security policy? And ask questions about it. Oftentimes policies are written, this goes outside of IT as well. Policies are written in a dry legalese, manner. If you don't understand what's in your policy, ask your security leader, what should I classify this type of data as? How should I think about my access to this application? I'm talking with this vendor about this really sensitive stuff. Is my, how should I be thinking about the security and the protection of that data? It's a great way to start that conversation. And I would say by and large, your security team will welcome that. The other thing, and even zooming out from the employees and kind of team members, I like to try and highlight the fact that it's a team sport. Security is a team sport, and it extends beyond the four walls of your organization. You're starting at the top, board of directors. Jim, great example of a body related to an organization, but technically outside of that organization. Independent board members. All of the leadership should have some skin in the game of understanding and managing IT risk in an organization. Coming on the left-hand side, there are a ton of organizations out there. COCPA. I mean, here I'm a member of COCPA. I have worked with and would love to support more organizations in and around Colorado. In the public accounting and the accounting space. But other than this organization, there's a lot of federal funded and industry organizations that you can connect into. Many of them are free to join. Many of them have forums like this. Many of them have reports that they can provide out, and Slack channels and other ways to engage with industry peers and industry partners. So ISAC stands for the Information Sharing and Collaboration, I think, groups. And they're oftentimes based on industry. So when I was at Vail, we were a member of RH, Retail and Hospitality, ISAC. And so I could engage with my counterparts and my colleagues at Target and at Carnival Cruise Lines and at other industry organizations that may be facing similar challenges or similar threats or similar regulatory obligations. The other one that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about, but I think has huge untapped potential, is engaging with your vendors. So, the big ones, Microsoft has a huge security team and security function in and of themselves, but oftentimes these companies and these products are building in security capabilities, even if they're not designed to provide security functions like CrowdStrike. And as an organization, your product companies, your vendors want you to get the most out of your investment in their product, in their platform. So I encourage you to talk with your sales, the account managers, the account executives, your sales reps, to say, hey, can we have a solution session? Can we have a health check where we look at the settings and make sure that I've configured your tool in the most secure manner? Companies don't want their tool to be the avenue in which your organization was breached or data was exfiltrated. So that's another lens and another angle of free, in many ways you're already paying for it, but free additional access to information security expertise. All right, on to our next polling question. Where do you think increased support or engagement would have the biggest impact in your or your clients' organizations? From what group or what body outside of the information security function would you think? All right, a lot of good answers coming in. All right, I think we've stabilized here. Okay, good. So almost half think from the employee perspective. And then the next two are leadership, executive leadership, C-suite, board of directors, investors, strategic leadership. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I agree. One of the things I do for a lot of my clients is support security awareness training and communication, and empowering or enabling the workforce to understand what their role is, understand what they can do, and reminding them what is available. Actually, later in about a month, I'm giving a presentation. There's the annual Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference in June. I'm giving a talk titled Human EDR. So EDR stands for Endpoint Detection and Response, and that's like the new terminology for antivirus, anti-malware software that's on systems. So my talk is around human EDR and changing the lens of the way you look at employees. So I think it's I kind of agree with the majority here, where that's the largest untapped potential of support in operating and maintaining a secure and risk managed risk managed environment organization. All right, so we talked about starting with the business. We talked about starting with the people. Now, let's start with the plan. So, I think this is probably something that we all are very familiar with and comfortable with. Establishing engagement letters, establishing commitments, and what is the obligation of our financial, our audit, our assessments that we may be doing with an organization, our development of our financial roadmaps, our plans, our forecasts, and looking backwards, how did we do against those plans? I recommend embedding and encouraging similar thought process and similar discipline around information security. There are a lot of publicly available and industry recognized frameworks that allow, in many ways, the organization to take some of the emotion out of, or the subjectivity out of this complex and scary topic. These are three that I really recommend to start with. CIS is the Center for Internet Security. They're a part of SANS, which is a part of the U.S. government. The CIS critical security controls, if an organization has nothing or doesn't know where to start, that's where I recommend. There are 18 overall controls, and they're broken into sub-controls. They're broken into different security objectives, or security safeguards, they call them. And they break that down even further, saying there are 3 different implementation groups, or implementation tiers, where the first set is baseline, basic hygiene, baseline. If you're not doing anything else, these are the things that you should think about. And it's very prescriptive. As the organization grows in size and complexity, there are other frameworks to consider. The NIST cybersecurity framework is the one that I see most often used in the United States, or for US headquartered organizations. NIST just released the second version 2.0 of the framework, and it has a lot more complexity. This is the one that I often anchored to with my enterprise clients, and publicly traded firms would leverage the CSF, the NIST cybersecurity framework. ISO 27001 and 27002 are, I would say, more common outside of the US, or for organizations that have presence outside of the US. One of the other differences between these other frameworks and ISO is you can actually get a certificate. You can have an independent body come in and assess you against the ISO 27001 framework. And so as a smaller organization or as a product organization, sometimes that is a really valuable tool to use as part of your sales and your communication to your customers or to the marketplace, that you're taking, information security and your protection of systems, data, interactions seriously. So all good ones. Another one that I didn't include on here that has gotten a lot more attention recently is SOC 2. So SOC 2 Type 1, Type 2 are assessments and audits that actually a lot of CPA firms will perform. So they will perform SOC 2 audits and provide letters of compliance or of evaluation against that framework. I'd say those are more common for product companies, so companies that are offering technology products or SaaS solutions. But I've seen even engineering firms consider getting a SOC 2 because it is another one of those industry recognized things. And as you're building this plan and working on it, plans are as good as the paper that they're written on. and every plan changes from when it's first started to when you're done with the project. The other thing around security, as with financial management and auditing, is you're never done. This is something that is an ongoing effort and an ongoing initiative that you make progress against, then you reevaluate how the business has changed, how the market's changed, how the regulatory landscape has changed, and you iterate and you make changes, and then you evaluate what's next, what's the next direction to go, and go from there. One of the concepts and terminology that I've taken from my time at PwC and the public accounting Big Four space is making plans defensible. So oftentimes it's we are operating in spaces of uncertainty, and we're operating with limited information or a sample set of data, and we want to leverage methodologies that have structure to them and can and can be defensible. So I was leading a little bit into my fourth piece, but don't worry about making everything perfect. And just like in the internal financial controls space, no organization is ever going to be 100% every single time, every single instance compliant, following every single control. So, but you want to evaluate what are the thresholds, what are the operating models, and what are the key controls that you must be as perfect as you can against. So leveraging a lot of those same concepts and translating those into the IT and information security space is really valuable. All right, last polling question here. So, what is the length of the most effective information security roadmap and plan, based on your experience or just conceptually? Your understanding of, you see cyber threats, you see breaches in Wall Street Journal every single day on the news. What do you think is the right duration? What's the right length of forward planning? This is good. We're getting a lot of variety in answers. Has anybody seen or been part of the development of a information security roadmap at your organization or at your clients' organizations? All right, I think we've got, I guess I'll answer myself on that question. So one of the interesting things and good experience at Vail, so we, from a security perspective, information security team, we developed our roadmap and recommended initiatives on an annual basis, aligned with the financial year, the fiscal year. The next step from there is we would usually, identify 5 to 10 key projects or key initiatives. Oftentimes our internal audit team would tackle 2 to 3 of them and would support from a budget perspective, would engage with external parties. And so, to me, we had a relatively small security function compared to the size of the IT function in the organization. But we collaborated and partnered very closely with the internal audit team to make progress.
Mike, one of the ones that I've done several times, I've got a lot of government contractors, and the new CMMC guidance, level 1, level 2 stuff that's out there.
Yep.
I've participated in, very small companies and $100 million contractors. And so we've done level 1, level 2. What's your opinion about CMMC?
Yeah, CMMC it's an interesting one. So CMMC stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and it is a requirement that has been in the development for, I think, over 7 years by the federal government.
Right.
It is, the intent of it, I think, is fantastic. It is intended to establish a baseline set of requirements that any organization that is directly or indirectly part of the supply chain supporting federal agencies, federally funded organizations, they must comply with. The implementation and in practice, it's hard and it's really expensive for what I'll say is 90% of the organizations that are going to be in scope of it. I actually am supporting a privately held but multi-billion-dollar defense, aerospace and defense company with their CMMC program, and it provides a really good framework for this organization to approach. They have the budget, they have the resources to be able to achieve, and they're going to be measured against level 2. There are 3 levels: level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3 are reserved for the biggest and the most complex and the most highly confidential or potentially overlapping with not confidential. What am I looking for? The top secret, like more controlled, secret and government data. But it's good for them, for all of their suppliers that also inherit the CMMC requirements. The 10-person organization that makes a small widget that ultimately gets built into, a bigger widget that goes into an airplane that Lockheed Martin builds. It's really hard and it's really expensive to get there. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but I don't think they're done. In some ways, I kind of think about it in a similar vein as how the SEC is starting to impose some of these obligations on organizations. Like, I personally, professionally, I don't think the SEC has any business, managing cybersecurity risk. That's not the intent of the organization. However, they are using their position to drive conversations and behaviors within organizations that I think are positive and good for those businesses and really for us as consumers and members of society and in the marketplace. So I kind of approach CMMC in a similar vein, and really recommend taking a risk-based approach and striving for it, but also being pragmatic in how you build that plan, how you try to achieve it. It's a good question, Jim. We see a lot of that in Colorado. We got a lot of aerospace and defense.
Sure do.
All right. So last recommendation, if you don't want to start with the business, if you don't think that's the right spot, if you don't think starting with, building your coalition, finding your partners, finding your, coalition of the willing, if you don't feel like writing a plan and taking that to your leadership or asking your, information security partners to do that, just start somewhere. For yourself, turn on multi-factor authentication for all of your applications. Many organizations and many applications are requiring that, but there are a lot out there that still don't. So, if you're interacting with different applications for your job, see if you can turn on multi-factor authentication. Go into your user settings, see if you can turn that on. Ask the question, read your cybersecurity policy, read your information security policy. There are a lot of things that I call no regrets activities that you don't really need any permission to do. And oftentimes, if your boss or your leadership hears that you are doing something like that, it's a positive, it'll be looked at in a positive light. So, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Start somewhere, start anywhere, and start to build some of that momentum. Share with your teammates, share with your colleagues, share with your family, share with your your friends, people in your network, and ask questions. So last I will leave is to me, this is one of the reasons why I started NTM Advisory as an organization. So I guess I didn't talk on that at all, but I started at PwC, massive global public accounting firm. Went to Vail, still very big, publicly traded, 10,000 full-time employees. Working my way down, I went to about 120 person consulting firm and led their cybersecurity practice. And then about a year ago, I started NTM Advisory, and my I guess guiding principle here, or guiding light, North Star, is that I've seen how enterprises that have budgets, that have resources, approach cybersecurity. And I've seen how small organizations that don't have the budget and the resources approach cybersecurity. And so many smaller organizations kind of throw their hands up and say, well, I can't do anything about it. But I genuinely believe that any organization can do things to improve their risk posture, to mitigate the likelihood of cybersecurity breach. And stronger cybersecurity in our small and medium-sized businesses makes stronger customers, stronger, bigger organizations, and stronger markets. And it's better for us all as employees, as consumers, and as members of society. So that's my content. I appreciate 30 or so of you from showing up. It's I hope you learned something. I hope I got some wheels turning, and you have some things to take away. But now I'll kind of open it up. I think we have about another 10-15 minutes. If anybody has comments, questions, reactions, examples, or scenarios where you're like, how should I approach this? Love to hear from the group.
Mike, if you've got a CPA that's, don't care where you're working at, right? You could be a sole proprietor, work in a CPA firm, a controller in an engineering firm, wherever else. Where does the CPA get this kind of guidance and like an InfoSec policy? Where do we start looking at that? I mentioned CMMC. And so I've heard some
Yep.
people in the past talk about, if you wanted to build a framework in your own organization, maybe I think there's 19 points in level 1. It's like the minimum standards. Is that something to consider? I know NIST is another group that has some
Yep.
like checklists, like you got to do this, you got to do this, got to do this and do this.
Yep.
Does that, where would you recommend a CPA kind of approaching that from the beginning?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. All of those are great spots to start. One place that I would point people is CISA, CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They're a body under the Department of Homeland Security, and they publish a lot of great free material. And so that's one. NIST. So if you are in the government federal space, or you're a subcontractor to a big prime, then the CMMC is a good avenue to look. But every other industry, I would say, go to the NIST cybersecurity framework. There's even a website that is focused on small and medium-sized businesses. They've put together a bunch of material of your on-ramp to the NIST cybersecurity framework. Try to make it as simple and easy to understand and get going. AICPA actually also and SEMA also have some good content and material available. Last year, I actually sat on a panel at the Engage conference where we talked about what the CFO should be worried about from a cybersecurity perspective. So, AICPA and COCPA obviously understand that this is a challenge in the marketplace and for our members. So in many ways, I would say go where you feel most comfortable and start asking questions and see where that goes. But NIST and CISA would be the two that I would recommend also. And I'll see if I can find a quick link and drop those in the chat so people can bookmark those.
That'd be great. I've got another question for you, Mike.
Sure.
When I work with my clients on their insurance renewals, we're looking at our cyber policy.
Yes.
Sometimes we get these checklists from the insurance provider says, do you have these 36 items in place?
Yep.
What's your thoughts about, is that a starting place? And then, what I've also understood now, some of the carriers are saying, if you don't have these 36, it could limit your ability to, secure cyber insurance, that kind of stuff. What's your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. So cyber insurance is something I could talk about for a whole nother hour. It's a super, super interesting space. And, for us math geeks in the audience that care about actuarial models or have some interest in actuarial models and risk models, the cyber insurance industry, their risk models have been inverted for the last 3 or 4 years. Their loss ratios are out the window. And part of that is because the way that insurance underwriting has been done previously was more questionnaire based and often tied to the industry that an organization was in and their financial position, and it had nothing to do with their actual controls or their practices that were in place. And so these major insurance providers were paying out these huge claims when really they shouldn't have been underwriting at the same way in the same way that they had. So this is a very polarizing topic around cyber insurance, but my glass half empty look at this is it's a great forcing factor for this conversation, right? So when you think about a CEO, partners in a firm, board of directors, they want to mitigate their business risk. And one of the great ways to transfer or offload certain risk is through insurance. If you talked with any professional services firm that doesn't carry an errors and omissions policy, I would look at them sideways, right? It's it's just a standard way of approaching business and mitigating and managing your overall risk. So yes, if you do, so if you have an insurance policy, that's another body to engage with. And I'm actually going to add that to my slide. It's a great point, Jim, where, look at your policy. Oftentimes in the policy, there will be certain requirements or expectations that are established, even if that is not built into the process of obtaining that policy or going through the underwriting process. We're seeing that a lot more, and oftentimes companies are getting, caught, if you will, in the renewal process where, from a business leader perspective, they're thinking, yep, great. We'll go in, we may get a slight bump in our, premiums, but we've been carrying this insurance for a number of years. We're just going to renew. And a lot of these insurance companies are coming now with more detailed questionnaires, more detailed expectations of, can you provide me evidence of your information security policy? Can you provide me evidence of the security of your endpoints? Your backups, the mitigating, one of the most common ways to mitigate ransomware attacks is to have backups that you can recover from, you can restore from. And so cyber insurance, ransomware continues to be one of the highest reasons for claims. And so if you don't have a backup policy, you're either not going to be approved for a policy, or your premiums are going to go way up. So it's a great one to bring up, Jim.
Okay. My other one that sometimes I've been steered, I don't have your expertise on cybersecurity, but I've found managed service providers, right? My firm has Contact PC as our managed service provider, right? And I check with them periodically about the checklist of like, what's the minimum that I need for my firm. And so what's your thoughts about managed service providers as kind of a back check for how you should conduct yourself?
Yeah, it's another great one of a tool at your disposal to manage and mitigate your risk. And I would say it's almost always a recommendation of mine for small and medium-sized businesses. It doesn't make financial sense to hire the experts into an organization. A 100-person organization, it doesn't make sense to have a security team of 5 people. Like they're expensive resources, and so looking at and leveraging managed service providers is a great way to get increase your game, up level your capabilities at a more reasonable cost. The one piece that I would say as a word of caution, though, is engaging with a managed service provider may transfer responsibility, but it does not transfer accountability. So you as the organization are accountable for making sure that the managed service provider is doing what they're supposed to be doing in their contracts and is doing a good job. So, a lot of small companies, especially ones that are not in the technology space, are like, oh yeah, I'm paying so-and-so to do that and deal with it. And if I have a security incident, I'm going to call them and they're going to take care of it. Well, not entirely. So it's a great tool, again, a great tool to have in the toolbox, but thinking about it from a risk lens, you as the organization, you as the CEO, you as the partners still carry that, that risk and that accountability.
Awesome.
I had a question come into me as well. It says, basic question, should businesses encourage customers not to use checks due to all of the incidences of fraud associated with checks? What are more secure payment systems, in your opinion, for customers and businesses and nonprofits?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So business email compromise, BEC, is number 2 on the list of most common cybersecurity incidents or events. And BEC is oftentimes like wire fraud, where somebody will, use email to communicate with an accounts payable team or a finance team and say, oh, update these wire instructions. This is the new, this is the new account details. It's, I guess my recommendation. So I think checks are still totally viable to operate with. Many of my customers still pay me with a paper check, hard copy paper check. More of what I would recommend is to think about the overall business process and make sure that you have checks and balances. So if you have one person that is doing all of your finance, make sure that the COO or the CEO is also double checking anytime main payment processing information gets changed. If there are wire instructions that are being made, make sure that you have a two-person kind of check on that business process. Credit cards are a good way to mitigate and offload some of that risk, but that does include processing fees. And so, if depending upon the size and volume of your transactions, that might be a way to look at mitigating some of that risk. But there is some cost associated with that. It's a good question.
Any other questions? Now we got our expert here. All right. Well, Mike, how else from an education standpoint? I've got a couple ideas, but if I wanted to just get educated on a general theme of cybersecurity or an InfoSec, where's a place I can get a YouTube video or some training or that kind of stuff? Where would you recommend to get that kind of training and understand at a next level?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a lot of free training. Again, I would point you probably to NIST and CISA. Okay. There's a lot of free training and videos and content there. Or search on YouTube, search on Instagram, search on TikTok. Actually, a lot of those organizations have channels and presence on those different platforms to be able to get to, be accessible to everybody. Every single learning platform, so Pluralsight, LinkedIn Learning, if your organization has as part of your overall benefits or your overall learning and awareness or L&D capabilities, search for cyber. There's always good stuff there, or there almost always is content. The last place, which is perhaps a different one than you would anticipate, is the World Economic Forum. They have a whole dimension around cybersecurity, and that one is interesting because it's global. All the other resources that I talked about are very much US centric and US focused. World Economic Forum has a lot of really good free content, and they have a whole platform. I think it's backed by Salesforce around learning modules, and it's for general practitioners all the way down to secure coding practices for IT developers. So. Good question.
Gotcha.
It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the time, Jim, and thanks everyone for taking a chunk out of your day today. If you have questions that you didn't want to raise your hand on, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am a member, or reach out to me on COCPA. Like I said, I'm a member and would very much welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation.